In the ancient world, one of the largest armies ever assembled marched to erase a city from the map. The city's king was given a simple choice: surrender and be annihilated, or fight and be annihilated. He chose defiance. This is the story of how a king in Jerusalem faced down an impossible army and, somehow, survived. But how much of this legendary tale is actually true? The answer, it turns out, is buried beneath the ancient city, hidden in the records of empires, and found in the incredible ingenuity of a king who simply refused to break. So today, we're peeling back the layers of history to investigate the military strategies, the archaeological proof, and the conflicting stories of one of history's greatest tales of defiance. Our story kicks off in 701 BC, a time of giants. In the east, the Neo-Assyrian Empire was the undisputed superpower of its day. Its heartland was in modern-day Iraq, but its reach was vast and its methods were famously brutal. At its head was King Sennacherib, a ruler who saw himself as a king of the world, a man whose military machine was the most advanced and terrifying force on the planet. The Assyrians were masters of siege warfare, methodical, relentless, and brutally effective. When they marched, entire kingdoms trembled. Way over in the west, nestled in the Judean mountains, was the small, and what seemed like an insignificant kingdom of Judah. Its capital was Jerusalem, and its king was a man named Hezekiah. For years, Judah had been a vassal state, basically paying protection money, a heavy annual tribute to Assyria to be left alone. But Hezekiah wasn't like the kings before him. He was a reformer, a builder, and a rebel. He centralized worship in Jerusalem, and then, in an incredibly bold act of defiance, he decided to stop paying the tribute. He started making alliances with Egypt and other local rulers, betting that a coalition could stand up to the Assyrian giant. Hezekiah knew this was a declaration of war. By refusing to pay, he was essentially spitting in the eye of the world's most powerful man. Sennacherib's response was as predictable as it was swift. He couldn't let a rebellion like this slide, or every other kingdom paying him tribute might get the same idea. He gathered his forces, a colossal army that ancient sources describe in apocalyptic terms, and began a devastating march west to make an example of Hezekiah and his upstart kingdom. For the people of Judah, the unstoppable force was now heading directly for them. The Assyrian advance through Judah was a campaign of pure terror. This wasn't just an army marching to a single city. It was the systematic dismantling of a nation, piece by piece. Sennacherib's own records, inscribed on a clay prism found in the ruins of his capital, Nineveh, boast about his conquests. He claims he conquered 46 of Hezekiah's fortified cities and countless smaller towns, deporting over 200,000 people. And if you think that sounds like propaganda, we don't have to rely only on texts. We can look at the silent, chilling evidence dug up by archaeologists at the city of Lachish. Lachish was Judah's second most important city, a formidable fortress southwest of Jerusalem. It was here that Sennacherib set up his field headquarters to make a very public and very violent statement. In his palace back in Nineveh, Sennacherib dedicated an entire room to massive stone reliefs that show the battle in graphic detail. We can see Assyrian archers, slingers, and enormous siege engines pounding the city walls. Archaeology at the site, Tel Lachish, confirms this account with startling clarity. Excavators found the most compelling piece of evidence you could ask for: the actual Assyrian siege ramp. This was a colossal structure of stone and earth, built under a constant hail of arrows and fire from the city's defenders, all to get a battering ram up to the walls. One study estimates that building it may have required moving 3 million stones, a task completed in as little as 25 days by prisoners of war working around the clock. The palace reliefs show the grim aftermath. Judean defenders impaled on stakes, their leaders begging for mercy, and the city's survivors being led away into exile. The message, aimed squarely at Jerusalem, was crystal clear: this is your fate. Surrender now, or you're next. With the Assyrian war machine practically on his doorstep, Hezekiah knew Jerusalem's only hope lay in clever preparation. He couldn't beat Sennacherib in a straight fight, so he had to turn his capital into a fortress that simply couldn't be broken. His plan was a masterclass in ancient engineering, and it focused on the two things you need to survive a siege: strong walls and fresh water. First, the walls. Jerusalem had grown a lot in the years before the invasion, partly because refugees were pouring in from the northern kingdom of Israel, which had already fallen to Assyria. A whole new neighborhood had sprung up on the hill to the west of the original city, but it was dangerously exposed, lying outside the old fortifications. Hezekiah made a bold, even ruthless decision. Just as the Bible describes, he ordered houses inside the city to be demolished to provide stones for a massive new defensive wall. In the 1970s, archaeologists in Jerusalem's Jewish quarter found a stunning piece of this project: an ancient wall an astonishing 23 feet thick. Today, it's fittingly known as the Broad Wall. This beast of a wall quickly enclosed the vulnerable suburbs, dramatically expanding the city's defensible area. But even the strongest walls are useless if the people inside die of thirst. A city's water source was its greatest weakness. Jerusalem's main water supply, the Gihon Spring, was located in a valley just outside the city walls. Leaving it exposed would give the Assyrian army an unlimited supply of fresh water, while Jerusalem's own supply could be easily cut off. Hezekiah's solution to this was pure genius. He ordered his engineers to undertake one of the great marvels of the ancient world, the Siloam Tunnel. Two teams of workers, armed with little more than picks and hammers, started digging from opposite ends, one at the Gihon Spring, the other from inside the city at the Pool of Siloam. They chiseled a winding 1,150-foot tunnel right through solid bedrock. How they managed to navigate toward each other and meet so perfectly in the middle is still debated by scholars, but an inscription found inside the tunnel, written in ancient Hebrew, captures the incredible moment the two teams broke through, hearing the voices of their co-workers from the other side. This amazing feat hid the Gihon Springs water from the Assyrians and secured it deep inside the newly fortified city. With his walls strengthened and his water supply locked down, Hezekiah had done everything humanly possible. Now all he and his people could do was wait. Finally, the Assyrian army arrived and surrounded Jerusalem. From his headquarters, Sennacherib sent his top official, the Rabshakeh, to deliver a message, not to the king, but to the soldiers on the walls. It was pure psychological warfare. He shouted in Hebrew so every defender could understand. He mocked their alliance with Egypt, calling their ally a splintered reed of a staff that would break and pierce their hand. He even ridiculed their faith in God, claiming that no God had saved any other nation from Assyria's power. His goal was simple: break their morale and turn them against their king. And this is where the story splits into two completely different versions. We have two main sources describing what happened next: Sennacherib's own royal records and the account in the Hebrew Bible. First, the Assyrian version. On the baked clay artifact known as the Sennacherib prism, the king gives his official, state-sanctioned story. He boasts about destroying Judah's other cities and taking tons of plunder. But when he gets to Jerusalem, his language gets weirdly specific. He says, "As for Hezekiah, the Jew, who did not submit to my yoke, himself I made a prisoner in Jerusalem, his royal residence, like a bird in a cage." He then lists a massive tribute of gold, silver, and ivory that he claims Hezekiah sent him. It's a powerful image, the rebel king, trapped and helpless. Now for the second version, found in the Bible in the books of 2 Kings and Isaiah. This account agrees that Hezekiah initially tried to buy Sennacherib off with a heavy tribute. But it claims Sennacherib took the money and besieged the city anyway. Faced with total annihilation, a desperate Hezekiah prayed for a miracle. The prophet Isaiah then delivered a stunning prophecy. Sennacherib would not enter the city. He wouldn't even shoot an arrow at it. Then the story takes a wild, miraculous turn. It says that the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. According to this version, the devastated Assyrian king had no choice but to pack up and go home in disgrace. So we have two conflicting stories. One is about a king trapped like a bird and forced to pay for his survival. The other is about divine intervention on an epic scale. To figure out what really happened, we have to look at what isn't being said. The key to solving this mystery lies in what the sources pointedly leave out. Assyrian kings were master propagandists. Their royal records weren't objective history. They were monuments to their own greatness, carefully curated to record only victories. Defeats were simply never mentioned. And that right there is the crucial clue. In Sennacherib's own detailed account, for all his bragging about trapping Hezekiah like a bird in a cage, there is a massive omission. He never actually claims to have captured Jerusalem. For a king who documented the fall of 46 other cities and even had giant stone carvings made to celebrate his victory at Lachish, this silence is deafening. To besiege the enemy's capital, the ultimate prize, and then fail to mention its conquest is basically an admission of failure. The historical consensus is clear. Whatever happened, Jerusalem was not taken. The city survived. So what did happen to the Assyrian army? While the Bible speaks of an angel, many historians think a sudden, devastating outbreak of disease could have been interpreted as a miracle. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, writing a couple of centuries later, tells a strange, garbled version of the story, where Sennacherib's army was defeated by an invasion of field mice that chewed through their bowstrings and shield handles overnight, leaving them defenseless. Many scholars believe this is a distorted memory of the same event, and that the mice could be a metaphor for plague, since rodents are notorious carriers of disease. An army of tens of thousands, camped in unsanitary conditions and possibly deprived of clean water thanks to Hezekiah's tunnel, would have been a perfect breeding ground for a fast-spreading epidemic like cholera or typhus. A plague that wiped out a huge chunk of the army in just a few days would have looked like nothing less than an act of God to the defenders watching from the walls of Jerusalem. Whether it was a divinely sent angel, a devastating plague, or Hezekiah's brilliant engineering, or maybe a combination of all three, the result was the same. The most powerful army on earth was stopped dead in its tracks. In the end, the story of Hezekiah's defiance is so much more than a legend. It's a story deeply rooted in historical fact. Archaeology confirms the frantic preparations. The broad wall still stands as a monument to desperate innovation, and the Siloam Tunnel remains a testament to incredible engineering. The Assyrian records themselves even back up the story through their conspicuous silence on the one city they couldn't conquer. Sennacherib returned to Nineveh, where he was eventually assassinated, ironically, by his own sons. But Hezekiah and Jerusalem had survived. The city's seemingly miraculous deliverance became a cornerstone of its identity, a powerful story of faith and resistance that would echo for centuries. It cemented Jerusalem's status as a city protected by a higher power and fueled a legacy of defiance that would shape the course of history. The story of 701 BC shows us that sometimes, against all odds, the caged bird doesn't just sing. It sings a song of freedom, and that is an epic tale worth remembering. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories of legendary battles and historical mysteries. And let us know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to tackle next.